everyone. This is the West Virginia Dance Company's series, Artist Interviews and Repertory that we've had from past choreography. Today, we are going to be doing something that's very special to me. My dear friend and one of our primary choreographers, Carli Mareneck, is here, and we're doing a series of women's history. And since this is the 100-year celebration of suffrage, Carli did a beautiful film that she'll mention later. And we're going to start speaking about a work that I did that has to do with West Virginia and coal mining. This was one of Carli's favorite pieces always that she's mentioned to me. So I'm going to let her start with her reflection of what she felt when she watched the piece, and then I'll speak about my process.
I've always had a wish to be one of the performers in this dance. I love it so much. And I think it's interesting how Toneta has over time often been able to choose a historical event and then explore it in such a way that the audience really grasps that historical event in a way they wouldn't have otherwise. And in this case, there's the horrible Matewan shootings and all of the protests that took place. And she chose a unique perspective of the wives on the picket line. And somehow this physical language can show their anguish and their resolve. And even the music score, both the quote and the Hazel Dickens song, really shows the honesty and the courage that it took to stand up against such a really overbearing system. So she always can use gesture and full movement and show this dramatic depth that I so appreciate and respect.
Carli, that's such an honor because you do such beautiful work and are one of my favorite artists. So thank you for that. I guess to add, basically, my whole family was in coal mining. And of course, most everybody I know, my grandfather came from Spain and was a coal miner. So this coal mining issue and our history has been very important to me always. And this dance that you're going to see is a very small section of a much larger work that we will be sharing later in the year. I guess I was fascinated by Hazel Dickens and the way she used this particular art form of hers, music, as protest. And as Carli and I came up with the title for this program, my thoughts were arts in protest. And Carli said, well, you know, we need to include everyone. And that word protest is very sort of aggressive. So we want to be inclusive and use art to make lives better. And I do feel that Hazel Dickens was doing that. And Carli, I'll let you expand on your idea about why you felt it was so important to add to our title, Arts as Protest, Arts as Moral Compass, and then we'll view the piece.
Well, I think when I think of protest, I think of coming up against a power. And when I think of moral compass, I think of leading towards a direction that we need to go. And so if you think of a compass, it's the right direction. And what a moral issue is what is right, just, and humane. So often protesters are having to go up against systems that are immoral. And yet, as artists, we use our imagination to see what is possible. So we're leading towards what we can imagine, what is possible, a better outcome. And that's why I thought moral compass should be included.
you so much. I know that we had a really beautiful, deep conversation about this and how extremely exciting it is to be the 100th year of suffrage. So as we celebrate a woman from the past, let's now watch this little work and let's celebrate Hazel Dickens and all the wonderful things she did for all West Virginians to have a better life.
It were 1920 in the southwest field and things was tough. The miners was trying to bring the Union to West Virginia, and the coal operators and their gun thugs was set on keeping them out. Them was hand loading days. They paid you by the ton, and they didn't care no more for a man than they done for a draft mule. Them was hard people. Your coal miners then, they wasn't nobody who wanted to cross. So push come to shove, and pretty soon we had us a war down there in Mingo County, which in them days was known as Bloody Mingo. And that's where it all come to a head, there on Tug Fork, in the town of Matewan.
You can tell them in the country, tell them in the town. The miners down in Mingo lay their shovels down. We won't pull another pellet, another ton, or lift another finger till the Union we have won. Stand up, boys, let the bosses know. Turn your buckets over, turn your lanterns low. There's fire in our hearts and fire in our soul, but there ain't gonna be no fire in the hole. Daddy died a miner, Grandpa he did too. I'll bet this coal will kill me before my working days are through. In a hole that's dark and dirty and early break confined, I'll claim to make a union for the ones that leave behind. Stand up, boys, let the bosses know. Turn your buckets over, turn your lanterns low. Fire in our hearts and fire in our soul, but there ain't gonna be no fire in the hole. There ain't gonna be no fire in the hole.
So Carli, you shared with me a beautiful work that you were a part of, and I think a very important part of, because I think you were the actual organizer of this wonderful film that you did about women's suffrage and also about how important it is as we're coming into November 3rd and time for voting, and how women should really make sure that they use their freedom in this. So would you like to tell us things about this film, and then we'll watch this really beautiful piece that I'm so happy you shared with me.
Sure. Blue Skies Ahead here in Greenbrier County contacted me in June and asked if I would be interested in working on a project that would be filmed in July. And it was a blank slate, other than she did say, I'm asking you because instead of doing another documentary, there are so many documentaries happening about this 100-year anniversary. We want something artistic. And so that's why they asked me. And so it was extremely challenging as a logistical project because there was really no production budget, and I was in charge of finding a volunteer cast and locating all the costumes and creating the arc of the actions and the shooting locations, and all during COVID, so it was quite complicated, and there was a short timeline and sort of no budget. So it was really a taxing project, but an extremely gratifying project. It was extremely collaborative. And my main collaborator was Neely Seams, who's a recent graduate from Marshall University and a fine actress. And she and I had interesting, deep conversations about who writes the history. She had taken a class at Marshall on women's suffrage, and the African-American contributions weren't noted, really. I mean, maybe 10 minutes would be spent on one of the African-American suffragists, where 3 days would be spent on another white suffragist. So it was important to her that we marked this disenfranchisement of the African-American contribution that happened during the movement. And so luckily I had worked with this wonderful Mary Grace Legg, filmmaker from Locker Partners. And we were able to hire her professionally to do the edit. So after talking her through this arc of wanting to start in sort of biographical, historical context in black and white, and showing different characters, and then moving into the color, you know, as the 20s and 40s happened. And she was able to take all these ideas and, with this expert filmmaking, do an edit. She's actually a choreographer because she's the one who set the music. She's the one who placed the quotes where they are. And we work together, but her artistry is just remarkable. So it turned out to be a very gratifying project. And I realized it was not 100 years in 6 minutes, it's 200 years, because these women were working on this issue in 1820. The vote was secured in 1920, and we're having this celebration of this effort and this long struggle in 2020.
Thank you, Carli. So now we'll watch this beautiful work of art that you accomplished recently.
Well, what I really loved about the entire concert that was titled Love of Power, Power of Love was just this entire concept of these are choices that we make. Where are we going to put our attention and effort and energy? And this particular section just touched me so much because it was so simply wrought. And it seemed to me that it was about stepping forward and stepping back, which is the same thing that I was exploring in this voting film. There were so many defeats and there were so many setbacks, but the women kept going forward. And so I just loved its, I don't know, there's something very essential about this piece, and it's pared down. It's such a beautiful distillation.
I think this particular section of the work that was a 40-minute work, I started with this section after 2 years of researching and reading about women's history from centuries ago. And in doing that, what I really feel like kept coming up was patriarchal society and how that can actually not only harm the progression of women, but it can also harm the progression of men. But this particular section, I really wanted to do women's history. And I wanted it spoken by Adam Booth that I work with to have the feeling for the viewers that men are thought of in this work just as much as women, and that feminists, that word is not about women. It's about balance and beauty for both genders. So this particular piece, however, has a sort of lineage of history. There's 15 quotes that Adam spoke about before each movement, and the history was involved in each one of those up to achievements of women to this very day. And actually in the middle, it incorporated Frederick Douglass because he was definitely a feminist. So I was really excited to incorporate that in the middle of the work. And I chose as costuming, I wanted to honor the ladies who made it into our Congress, and they wore white, and white has been a color of women's suffrage. And basically, that's it. Just a lot of research and a lot of history, and then paring that down to many women were left out, of course, but hopefully you will enjoy this small clip. And it helped me read back to Hazel Dickens and the women in the coal mining piece, and how some themes of inequities have to constantly be worked at. So I'll just say, as we watch this piece, please, ladies, it's October 2020, make sure you vote and make use of all of the strife that people went through for our freedom. So hopefully you will enjoy this work.
1436. Isota Nogarola is said to be the first major female humanist due to her influential literary work, Dialogue on the Equal or Unequal Sin of Adam and Eve. 1777. The Continental Congress asks Mary Catherine Goddard to publish the Declaration of Independence for distribution. 1850. Sarah Grimke produces the first coherent argument by an American for the emancipation of women. 1860. In an act of subversion, Emily Dickinson opens new possibilities with her creative, ungendered poetry. 1866. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Frederick Douglass found the American Equal Rights Association.
You do simply mystifies me. Tell me why should it be you have the power.
1903. For her work in discovering radium, Marie Curie is the first woman to receive a Nobel Prize.
You do something to me.
1933. As Secretary of Labor, Frances Perkins becomes the first woman in the U.S. to hold a cabinet position.
Something that simply mystifies me.
1953. Rosalind Franklin leads the way to the discovery of the double helix structure of DNA.
Tell me why should it be?
1960s. Dr. Gladys May West works to develop satellite geodesy models that lead to the GPS that are used by billions of people the world over.
You have the power.
Women of NASA achieve out-of-this-world feats of science, engineering, and mathematics in an industry dominated by men. Dorothy Vaughan, Kitty Joyner, Jeanette Sissom, Catherine Heyer, Catherine Pedrew, Mary Jackson, Melba Roy, Annie Easley, Nancy Grace Roman, Ellen Ochoa, Margaret Hamilton, Kalpana Chawla, Pearl Young, Sally Ride, and Katherine Johnson.
You do something to me. You have the power.
1993. Maya Angelou becomes the first female inaugural poet in U.S. history. 1997. Madeleine Albright becomes the first female U.S. Secretary of State. 2018. Donna Strickland wins the Nobel Prize for Physics, Frances Arnold in Chemistry, and Nadia Murad for Peace. 2019. Computer scientist Dr. Kate Bauman is credited with the first successful photograph of a black hole situated 500 million trillion kilometers from Earth.
So, that piece and Toneta's research again delves into this whole idea of power of love, love of power, and what does that really mean? It seems to me that oppression, domination, it's about being separate. It's about being safe by being separate. Whereas love of power of love is about respectful coexistence. It's about being part of something, being part of a society. And I just really noted throughout this that when you look at history, those who are protesting are often in their time looked on as criminals, judged as criminals, jailed as criminals. But later, when history arcs towards justice, when those laws are changed, those same people are looked on as heroes. And if you think about the abolitionist movement, particularly because it symbolizes a movement where people who were not directly affected still stood up and stood against the unjust laws at that time and were jailed. but then later we celebrate them as very courageous individuals. So when we think about democracy, this concept of equal justice for all, it's a beacon of hope to the world. And it's our citizens who work to achieve that vision. And I came up with this image that I really like of, often we're pretty vulnerable as individuals within these oppressive systems, but I love the image of how a blade of grass comes up through concrete, that the systems are concrete, but still this tender little blade of grass rises up. And there's always hope. And I think that the artists can envision and use imagination and be leaders in that way. And I just wanted to share this one quote from Martin Luther King Jr. in 1966. This is an excerpt, but it's a quote that speaks to this very issue that we're talking about. And he says, "I've decided that I'm going to do battle for my philosophy. I can't make myself believe that God wants me to hate. I'm tired of violence, and I'm not going to let my oppressor dictate to me what method I should use." So I think that, says something about this idea of protest and moral compass, that essentially we rise or fall as one, and artists can give insight into that.
Thank you all for joining today, and we hope you will tune in for the rest of the year to hear from our artists. Carli, thank you for your beautiful work that you always do for West Virginia Dance Company and your insight better world. So thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you, Toneta, for your ongoing work in this field. It's just remarkable and beautiful.